My name's Jeffrey Michael Bays. I'm the author of Between the Scenes, available in bookstores everywhere. Today we're going to be talking about mental maps. And this goes to your location choices, because every event that happens in your film should happen at a unique location, because the audience actually needs different locations to help them keep track of the story and the progression of the story. For instance, if you have a scene in your story that takes place on a windy bridge, and then later on in the story, something comes up and somebody refers to something that happened previously, and the audience is like, oh yeah, that was the windy bridge scene. I remember that scene. So if all the scenes in your film take place on the windy bridge, then it's going to become more difficult for the audience to keep track of the progression of the story events. And so putting your events at different locations throughout your story helps the audience compartmentalize, because each location then becomes a memory file in the viewer's brain. While the audience is watching the movie, they're constantly piecing together this mental map, and so you can actually use that to your advantage. MiniFilms actually put a map of the story on the screen, and then once you start thinking along those lines, then your establishing shots become more important as well to help the audience understand the mood of that location, and to distinguish that location from all the others. So let's take a look at an example here. Let's say that your story takes place in outer space. It's a science fiction movie. It happens in the local neighborhood of stars. You've got the Sun, you've got Alpha Centauri, Tau Ceti, Epsilon Uridani. These are the closest stars near us, about 10 light years away. And then we've got Altair, Vega, Sirius, Procyon, and the big Arcturus, and then some random red dwarves that are scattered around. And you also have the local fluff, which is a gaseous particle cloud that surrounds most of the stars in this area. So you can actually put this map on screen and let your audience understand this as well, and we can start to build an emotional landscape around this topography. If you have a story that takes place on Vega, for instance, or if you're going to travel to Vega, the audience isn't going to have any idea. The audience is going to think, okay, it's a star. It's a white star. All stars are white. All stars are exactly the same. And it's just a random star out in the sky. Well, if your story takes place in this local neighborhood, then you can start to build in features that distinguish one from another. So what you can do in your story is you can say, okay, our hero is going to travel from the Sun to Vega. But we established that Tau Ceti is a very dangerous place. It's got a lot of radiation. You don't ever want to get close to it. Oh, and you also have to stay within the local fluff. You can't travel outside the local fluff because there's something about the way the warp drive has to use the local fluff to enable its drive to work. So, so we've got this journey set up. We're going to go from the Sun, but we have to go around Tau Ceti. So he stops at the red dwarf. He's having lunch, and then he gets kidnapped. He gets kidnapped and taken to Alpha Centauri. Okay. Alpha Centauri is like the evil place where the enemy lives. They've got military camps, and he stays at a military camp, and he has to escape, and he has to choose whether or not to go back home to the Sun or to keep continuing on his journey to Vega. So many elements here that you've created, and you can actually put these onto the screen and incorporate these visuals into your story. Suddenly your audience is just pulled in to this environment, and they're also more connected with the emotional landscape of your film. So you might be wondering, well, what if I want my film to take place in one location? That certainly is possible. It's been done many times before. Single location films. In fact, here's a good example from Gus Van Sant's Gerry, which is a film that takes place entirely in a desert. Now, the trick is that they've actually filmed this in 3 different deserts, and they're pretending that it's one desert. But what happens is it gives you different geographical features. So as the film goes on, every location has a sort of mood and an emotional charge to it. And the next day, they start getting lost and confused, so the surroundings also kind of get more angular, more jagged rocks. Then what happens is they get into a fight, and they become angry at each other, and then at the same time, the environment becomes angry. You've got these tumbleweeds blowing around, strong winds, and it's dark, and You've got these shadows, another nighttime scene which demarcates from one scene to the next. And then they become exhausted because they're running out of food. They've been around in this desert for 3 days. And the landscape also reflects that they're exhausted. It's very flat. So the takeaway from all of this is that locations aren't just important on the individual scene level, that you have to take into account how they fit in to all the other locations in your film.